Okay. Hello and welcome to Ravlic at Large. My name's Tom Ravlic. Thank you for joining me for this particular episode. And we're doing something a bit different to what you would normally see me do. The Shrine of Remembrance in Victoria has a special exhibition that's on looking at the food our military is fed when they're, overseas and elsewhere. It is looking at the way in which we feed those that serve us overseas. Now, the exhibition started on the 2nd of December and it's going to go on throughout the next 12 months. So it's worthwhile if you've got a moment to go and check it out. You're going to learn a whole lot. But joining me in this particular episode is Gordon Traill. Now, Gordon's a former military chef with the ADF. He served in Iraq, and we're going to touch on the exhibition itself, as well as having a decent look at what it is that somebody who is a chef responsible for the logistics and feeding a whole bunch of mouths that are meant to be fighting on our behalf entails. And that's going to be fascinating. Gordon, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks all the viewers who are listening in on the podcast. And the Taste of War exhibition at the Shrine of Remembrance is all about catering in the Defence Force, and I was part of that for many years. Served 28 years, and the exhibition covers ration packs. They cover cooking for individuals in a environment, say in the officers' mess or sergeant's mess or the diggers' mess, and also covers hot boxing. And hot boxing is how we feed our soldiers. When I say soldiers, that's Airmen, Navy, and Army in the field. And also, we can do that on operations as well. And we cover that in the exhibition, and you'll be able to see how it's all done and the workings in the background. Yeah.
Now, if we just stay with the exhibition, so it started on December the 2nd, didn't it? And it covers everything from the Boer War up until very recently, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And the exhibition was it's really fantastic for someone like myself who was a caterer within the army, because we tend not to get much airspace when it comes to exhibiting items or talking about our military experience. It's always the door kickers and the shooters that get all the information. But however, catering plays such an important part in feeding our troops and keeping them the nutrition up to them so they can go about their job and do what they have to do in the on the battle space and back in barracks as well.
If we segue to your journey, you've said almost 30 years in the catering corps.
Yes.
When did this start for you? How old were you?
I was 4 years old when I knew I wanted to be a soldier. And I've got a photo of my two brothers, well, two of my four brothers either side of me, and I've got a little gun carriage and a Jeep in front of me at my birthday. So, yeah, and my father, he was a British World War II Air Force who had served 3 years in India and Burma during the Second World War. And my eldest brother, he was a Navy veteran of 30 odd years as well. So it was in the family. And at 15, I decided that, school wasn't for me. And my mum and dad said, right, you got to get out and either get an apprenticeship or join the Defence Forces. So I was too young for the Defence Force. So I went and did my apprenticeship as a civilian chef first at William Mangus College in Melbourne. And when I finished, I then went and joined up in the Army as a qualified chef. So it was, it was a good experience, that training. And, and when I first got into the military, it was a pretty different style of catering that I was used to.
Well, let's explore that for a bit. So you went through William Anglish. You did the sort of training that you would get that would give you the knowledge as to how to work in the sort of restaurant sector and hospitality more broadly.
Yes.
What was the difference between the culture that you were trained in and the one that you walked into when you entered into the Defence Force?
Well, the culture, yeah, that's good, Tom. The culture was fairly different. Like when I first got to my first posting in Sydney, it was at a infantry battalion, and they were all post Vietnam guys, all my section commanders and that corporals, who were the boss, and they didn't have any, touchy feely type of thing. They were actually, they'd slap you over the back of the head, if you made a mistake and things like that. So it was really different in going there. And one of the first shocks that I ever saw when I got into the unit was this. One of the guys was cooking as they called it, steak fingers and mushrooms, and I used to call it beef stroganoff, and here he was, he had this big pan on the stove, and he brings out this box of mushrooms, and the mushrooms weren't like the mushrooms we see today. There was still a lot of grit and dirt on these mushrooms. He picks up about a 12-inch knife, and he just slashes it across the box, and he, about 4 or 5 times, and dumps everything into the food there. And I was pretty horrified, in fact. So yeah, it was a shock to the system. And I always thought then, what, no matter where I am, whether I'm in the field catering or within barracks catering or on deployment, I was never going to do that style of cooking. I always wanted the diggers to get the best nutrition available. So yeah, so that was a bit of a rude shock when I first saw that, but I persevered, and yeah, went on to a fairly successful career in the catering corps from there, and yeah.
How do you, having said what you've just said and reflected on that experience,
Yeah.
how do you shift the culture to something that is more, um, um, understanding of the need to respect the people that you're actually feeding?
Yes, that's so true, and that was, it wasn't probably until I became a corporal myself that I had a team of around about 10 diggers that worked for me in a, say, an ORS mess, which is other ranks mess, where we're feeding up to 800, 1,000 diggers, and I'd have I was responsible at the age of 23 to cook for all these people and make sure the food was good. And, so I would just, get around the people and say, look, no, because at that period of time, you used to have the bush cooks and the in barracks cooks. And some people would always say, oh, yeah, so and so is a great bush cook, but in fact, all they wanted was speed out into the field to get the food cooked and get it out to the diggers as quickly as possible. Whereas my theory was, I would start training my soldiers. Look, no matter if you're in barracks or in the field or on operation, if you cut a carrot, you cut it the same way. There's no difference. So, and that's where that sort of change of culture occurred over a period of decade or so. And then, later in my career, I went to the School of Catering for the Army as a sergeant, and then later on, I went back as a warrant officer. So I was able to influence a lot of soldiers during that time there.
One of the interesting things in your background, obviously, is you were stationed in Iraq for a period of time. How long was that?
Yeah, that was around in 2004. I just going back one little step there. I'd gotten out of the military just before East Timor, and then when I saw East Timor happen, I was really disappointed that I wasn't in the services at that time, because we always want to deploy it and test your mettle and yourself. And once September 11 happened, I looked at my wife and said, "You know what? I'm going back in the service." So within 6 weeks of applying to join the army, I was back in uniform. But they ended sending me to to look at to work in a multi-million-dollar catering feeding of the Army, Air Force, and Navy at Vic Barracks. So I got to drive a desk for a couple of years, and then I said, because we would travel around Australia for a month at a time. And when I got up to Darwin, that was the place where everything was happening straight after September 11. So I went and said to the posting people, I want a posting to Darwin so I can deploy overseas. And within a couple of months, I was on my way to Iraq, and yeah, and life changed for me on that. That as soon as I hit the ground, life changed dramatically for me. So it was a pretty interesting time during that period of time. It was, like countries and that around the world, Beirut, Lebanon, they all get the tag of most dangerous city in that time. And at that time, Baghdad was. So I was part of a security detachment that was. We had to ensure that the Australian ambassador and his team could get around Baghdad in a safe manner. So, and we had a roughly 120 people that we fed. There was myself, and I had a corporal, Steve Riley, and we were responsible for the food and water of these 120 soldiers. We were like a mini army in one shell of a building we lived in. And there's, we had the infantry, we had the cavalry guys that drove around in 13-ton armoured vehicles. We had the Q store people that looked after supplies. We had uh, explosive experts and everything like that. So, at 48, I was at that stage. I was the old man of the unit, but I had a really important job, was to ensure that we fed our diggers the best food. So, because of how much energy you expend when you're on operations or out in the field, I made sure that they all had enough food to eat, and there was never no kind of double helpings or anything like that. And yeah.
Okay. In the context of a place like Iraq,
Yeah,
there would be logistical challenges that you would confront.
absolutely.
Um, so, take me from a project management perspective, from the perspective of managing the task of feeding the people for whom you were responsible.
Mm.
Um, were there examples at any point during that period where items you would need to keep a particular menu current simply disappeared, simply weren't around, or couldn't make it to you?
Well, yeah, it was interesting in the fact that when we first got on ground, we used to do a handover for 2 weeks. So I would shadow the person that had been in country before me. So I'd go around with him and see how they did their business and where they got their supplies from and so forth. So imagine a 6-story building. There was no interior as such. They had walls, but the bricklaying in Baghdad is not the best, and you could see through the walls and everything. So that sort of sets the scene. The kitchen, which was uh, the air the air vents, or to get rid of all the cooking smells and that. We had 3 toilet extractor fans built into a window, and we had sandbagged gas bottles around. So, and we had a one barbecue, big barbecue, and a normal household kitchen stove when I first got there. And there was no running water or anything like that. So it was a real challenge. So immediately I started to think about, okay, how can I improve the food for the soldiers that we're doing? So I would then I'd ring back to Australia and say, we need this, 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 and this, such as we need a proper stove, we need at least the sink and things like that. So I would start that the ball rolling so that we could get that better equipment in there. And I guess maybe the person before me or the ones prior, they didn't have that sort of pull or say, right, this is what we need. You got to get it for me. So I wasn't shy in getting on the phone and saying, listen, we need to get this here so we can do the best we possibly can. So within a couple of weeks, we had a Rationale stove, which is run in every industrial kitchen in Australia. Everyone's got one. So, I was able to get that and other things. Like, for instance, the senior NCOs and the officers, they would do the washing up in the dining room area in a cut off half 44-gallon drum, and they would fill water up. We'd have to boil water in the kitchen and take it over to them to start the washing. So I was able to get that sort of, just little things that made things a bit easier for everyone, because everyone is always like, when you're in a war zone 24/7, within arm's reach is your weapon and your webbing and helmet and everything, because at any time you could be called on to stand to. And when I mean stand to is you had to have each person in the sector, they had certain areas to get to. So some of the logistic stuff was quite. We were getting some American 40-man ration packs. So what that is, it's 40 men to feed for a day, for a couple of days, and some of the things in there was just not worth. The Australians would go, no, I'm not going to eat that, and it was very strange. So I had an interpreter working for me or working with me, and I started the ball rolling as soon as I got in country and said, look, where can I source this and where can I source this type of food? And so we started that liaison with the interpreter, and eventually we were able to go to the markets, pick up fresh bananas, and dates were amazing. And one of the funny stories is I said to Karim, because I was there during the period of the time I was there, it ranged from 40 to 55 degrees, and you cook an egg on the side of a Naslev. That's how hot it was. And we called it the Jenny Craig diet, because when you're wearing your ballistic vest, your helmet, and and in that weather, you just lose weight, and you tend to eat small meals as well during that time, but drink water. Water was such an important thing. And as a role of the caterer for me, I had to ensure that I had enough water in a reserve to ensure that if we, for some reason, we were sort of hunkered down and we couldn't get supplies, I still had the basic things such as water, because water is so important and everything. And we had MREs as well as a backup, meals ready to eat, which is a ration pack. And so I knew that I had to have X amount of litres of water and X amount of MREs in reserve. And like the thing I said to Krim, I said, oh, let's look, I want to get some ice so that I can chill, because we had these big, huge, big bins, so to speak, big plastic tubs with a lid on it, big eskies, and they were probably about 8 foot by 8 foot with a big lid. And through the rationing system of the Americans, we'd get near beers, which were non-alcoholic beers, and soft drinks and water and stuff. So I said, right, don't want the boys having to drink warm softies and that. So he goes, okay, I'll get you some ice. So one day, because we had to man pack everything from the lower level up to the third level. So we'd have, like the conga line with the diggers there unloading everything. And there's these blocks of ice, probably about 12 inches wide by 12 inches deep, and about four inches in the center is this brown sludge. Look, I'm sure I saw a three-headed fish from the Tigris River in there, but yeah, it was pretty wild. So, but at least it did the job, and and that dinner time when each of the diggers would come up for dinner and so forth, I would say, make sure that you wash it off, get your water, wash the cans off first before you put to your lips and that, because in the environment that we lived in, like, dust was everywhere, just unbelievable. And the sewage system was broken down, and there's raw sewage out the front of the building. It was just smell of heat and raw sewage and dust storms and everything. So the logistics of it was a bit of an issue. Fridays is normally like a quiet day. It's like a Sunday, but the Friday is for when I was in Iraq. And we would sometimes get, or depending on what was happening in Baghdad, they would fly some rations in from Kuwait, and I saw these. They had lettuce and cheese, sliced cheese, and everything that they would source down in Kuwait and fly them into us. And there was these boxes of steaks. They were about 3 or 4 inches thick, and these porterhouse steaks. I thought, well, the boys are going to love this. Then we thawed them out and we cooked them. That it's like eating rubber. It was terrible. So on to my mate Karim, my Terp, and he was saying, I said to him, I need baking powder, and he looked at me like I had two heads or something. And I said, it's not baking powder. This is what it looks like, and this is what happens. So we ended up getting baking powder. And baking powder, and mixed with sauces and that, I was able to marinate the steaks, and that makes the baking powder tends to break down the fibers, makes it a bit more enjoyable. So by the end of the tour, the boys were wrapped on Friday night, so I'd get the good steaks, and they go, how good's this? Life's good. So that was something that sticks in my mind from there. And but my offsider, Steve Riley, he was just a really good chef, really well trained in that. And we even made our own bread over there. And we even made yeah, chocolate eclairs as well, because we had both the same sort of give the diggers exactly the same food in any environment. But there were times when we had to break out the like if we had to stand to for a long period of time, they'd break out the MREs and they'd be whinging and carrying on the diggers, and you'd just go, you know what, do you want me to start cooking when all these mortars are dropping around us and stuff like that? No, you can do it then. So, yeah. So, there was in catering, there's a lot of good times as well. And, you know, because the soldiers need nutrition and calories, because, they burn up around to feed a digger on operations, you're looking at 3,500-4,000 calories a day to feed them. So that's a that's nearly double the amount of a normal person. Normally has around about 2,000 calories in that. So yeah, because they have different workloads to do and they carry different, body armor, backpack, stuff like that. So yeah.
Do did you at any point in time have to liaise with medics and others as you dealt with, the catering stuff to make sure that, the food was, the food that you were making sure was okay was
Yeah.
actually, keeping those guys um, in good nick? Because you've got the climate, as you've outlined, is not one that is particularly sterile in every single respect.
No. And yeah, well, to do with the medical people, we, as I said before, we had our own mini army there. We had medics who were with us. So if there was any issues in that, things that uh, it was mainly through the foodies, what we call the foodies. They're the logistics people that look after the food. Like say for instance, we're back in Australia and we're doing a exercise in the field for 3-4 weeks. Up the top end of Australia. So how I would then bring in the rationing for that is I would work out, okay, I would have a meeting with the commanding officer and said, right, uh, we're going field for this period of time to that period of time. When do you want to have a area or a time during that field exercise where you want to give them a bit of downtime so we could bring in some extra fruits and vegetables and stuff like that. And they would sort of like take a day off. So we would plan that prior to going in the field. And by planning that, I would have to indent for all the things that required me to feed 1,000 people in the field for 4 weeks. So there was a lot of work in the background, and then the logistics people, they're the ones that would come in and deliver it, uh, depending on if we were doing a tactical exercise or a non-tactical. Tactical exercise, you would get your rations late at night in the cover of darkness and things like that. So there was a lot of pre-planning for it, and then when we got on site in the field or in the combat zone, like we worked like a 24-hour. There was no rest time. There's some downtime, but there's no rest time. Like in Iraq, I went into Camp Victory, which was where the Australian and American headquarters were, and I went in there once to because they could get phone calls at any. You could use the phone at any time, whereas where we were in the red zone in Baghdad, we had half an hour phone calls for the whole week, so you could have 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. So one of the things that really shocked my wife when she saw the photos, here I am. I've got a weapon slung over my shoulder, and I'm cooking a barbecue. That really freaked her out. She said, "So, yeah." so, so dangers all around, but you expect that. When you
Yeah.
when you train for war, you train hard, fight easy.
The having, if we go back to where we started, I mean, you trained as a chef,
Yeah,
and then in a sense, a civilian chef,
yeah,
if I can put it that way. You go
yeah,
into the military, you start to observe a particular culture that was a bit rough and ready, not only physically towards yourselves as people in the army, but also rough and ready when it came to cooking.
mm,
At what point, I mean, at the conclusion of your career, what did you notice
look,
in terms of a change from when you started
mm.
to when you ultimately close things off?
Yeah, there was a big change in it because of the way we started to operate, and people with some outside knowledge was able to bring that knowledge into the environment. Excuse me, and with with the changes, it was more education all the time. At the catering school, we needed to improve this. Like when I first joined the army, there was no ongoing training. And then, 10, 15 years down the track, as a caterer, who was in charge of all my cooks in the unit.
Yep.
We used to have continuation training. And for instance, when I was posted to 1RAR in Townsville, I knew that each year we have a battalion birthday, and on that day we have a big parade and a big party and stuff like that. So with the on the job training and that, I was able to train them in margarine sculptures, some buffets, how to do a buffet platter and things like that. And even one of my sergeants, he wanted to learn about sugar pulling, so I'd had done that in every place that I'd been posted to. I always worked in Civvy Street to learn what was the new trends coming and that. So, and I picked up sugar pulling from a good mate of mine in Geelong, Brendan Hill, who's won numerous gold medals in the culinary Olympics and so forth. And the time when I was before I got out, I'd been selected as well as on the Australian national culinary team that went to Singapore in '94, and here we were walking into a kitchen, glass kitchen, and people would look at you cooking a 3-4 course meal for 150 people in a 4-hour period, and then going back to the within the services. We had an Australian culinary team that went to the Culinary Olympics, which are held every 4 years in Germany. And we had a full team of catering people from the three services, Air Force, Army, and Navy. So there was a huge push. And now, since I've gotten out, the catering has now been outsourced to colleges around. The ADF catering school is down at Cerberus, so the TAFE college close by, they do all the training. So the Australian Defence Force now are getting trained from outside. Yeah, and when they
It's
get into the units, that's when they learn the army side of things. So yeah.
so the quality of training has improved over time
Oh,
in terms of the system used.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, they've lost some things, when we used to train them. because we talk from, first-hand experience, what we did on the battlefield, what we did
Yep.
in barracks, what we did out in the field, and so forth. So, and that's where there's a bit of disconnect when they move from that civilian environment into the military environment. There can be a little bit disconnected, but that seems to have worked out now, so it's good.
To what extent are you able to share what support exists for those people that go from um, can we use the term normal loosely to go from what you might call a normal environment
Yeah,
into a combat or more militaristic setting?
sure. Yeah, like with because when you're in the army as a catering person, as a cook, you're working with, because one of the things, it's all teamwork, 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 teamwork. And like if the infantry have got a course on, they might be down range shooting, and so they'll take their company cooks with them, and they'll and the cooks interact with the other soldiers, the hitters, the heavy, the ones that kick the doors in and so forth. And so from there is a good connection with each other, and yeah,
So there's
it's
the catering personnel
mm,
simply assimilate because
yeah,
they're
yeah,
kind of
they
taken care
assimilate.
of by the others.
Yeah, and then with the with that, they there is, when you, because when you're going to deploy, we're talking about military deployment overseas for now. Like I said to my wife, I said, look, don't expect me to be uh, available for kids' Christmas parties, birthdays, anything to do outside my environment when I'm knowing that I'm heading to Iraq. I said, don't count me in on anything, and don't sort of say, are you going to be home by 5 o'clock? That just didn't work, because all we're focused on is you get a lot of training prior. You do the gas, you do the pepper spray, you do the riot stuff, and you do weapons at night time, during the day. So we do all that sort of military things to keep us alive as well. So you're a soldier first, cook second. So when the deployment comes up, you're so super fixed in knowing where you're going, what's the environment like, and everything else. So think when you hit the ground, nothing changes, and you're still doing your job. And the infantry guys, the cav guys, they're all doing their jobs as well. So and when you're in that theatre of war, everything is normal. It's not normal when you come back and you think, oh, that's a bit strange. That, like for example, Four Corners, they came over and did a piece on 12 months after Saddam, the invasion in 2003. I went 2004, and Four Corners came over and did and they chatted to some of the young diggers and that about life in Baghdad and that. So and I spoke to my wife and said, look, Four Corners doing a story on Saddam and so forth. Have a look at it. And so she phoned my sister in Melbourne, because there was a time difference between Darwin and Melbourne. My sister watched it, and she rang my wife. She goes, "Oh, I shouldn't watch it. It's too distressing." And I watched it over in country, and I thought, what's wrong? What do you mean too distressing? Yeah. So, but it's not till you come back you think, oh, that is maybe a bit distressing for people who weren't in the military side of things.
Now, having spent all that time cooking in the army,
Yes.
Can you stand the side of a stove at home?
Oh yeah, I still do a bit of cooking at home. Yeah.
No.
Well, yeah, yeah. I still cook. Yeah, at times, and yeah, enjoy it. But my most of the time now, I tend to take photography and art. I paint now, so yeah, I try and that's my that's what I do now. Is because at 50 I lost my identity, lost my job, lost everything when I was told, no, you're too broken, get out the system. So then and then my wife, to her credit, she was the one that got me into photography. Then she got me into painting. So I try and paint every day because that's the best soul food ever. Yeah. But cooking still, I still get a buzz out of cooking and that. So yeah, yeah.
Gordon, will people get a chance to see you at the exhibition from time to time over the next year?
Unfortunately, yes. Unfortunately, yes. You'll see me. You'll see my mugshot at the exhibition. We did a full day's filming at Commandos in Williamstown, and there I went through the paces. I actually got into my old cams, the desert cams, and put the cam apron on and
Yeah.
cooked up brekkies, lunches, some hot box meals, and some platters of freshly cooked salmon. So they're running that on a TV screen up at the shrine during the whole exhibition. So you'll see this face on the exhibition, and then you can give me feedback if it was any good or not.
All right, Gordon, thank you so much, firstly, for spending your time today with me. Thank you so much for your service. And I hope people get a lot out of the exhibition that you've helped curate and put together.
Yeah, get along and have a look at it and see what cooks do in the field and what they do, how we get that food onto the plate. Thank you, Tom. Much appreciated.
And that's the episode of Ravlic at Large for the moment. I've been talking to Gordon Traill, former military chef and someone who's served his country in Iraq. He's a part of the Taste of Combat exhibition. You'll see, as he said, a recording of him doing all the stuff that he would have done in the field during the time he served in the ADF. There'll be another few episodes before Christmas of this particular live stream program. Stay tuned to my YouTube channel or LinkedIn channel, and I welcome all of your feedback. Stay safe, look after each other, and we'll see you again soon.